The Jeep, Dodge, and Chrysler Triad are a little late to the electric vehicle game compared to the other parts of the American Big Three. Jeep has had some success with its Wrangler 4xe plug-in hybrid, but this is the first all-electric SUV, the 2025 Jeep Wagoneer S. The question is, was the wait worth it? Before we get around to answering that, do us a favor, hit the like and subscribe buttons below to get all of our latest content. Unlike the other Jeep Wagoneers, this is a mid-size SUV rather than a full-size behemoth. It's closer in size to the Grand Cherokee and retains only a hint of Jeep's styling heritage in the 7-slotted grille. I think it's a suitable adaptation for more modern times, and I like how the slim headlights are integrated into it for a more serious look. Down the side, there's an abundance of sheet metal that adds a lot of visual heft, which seems appropriate for a Jeep SUV. These dark side skirts and wheel arches are in keeping with Jeep's all-terrain history, though this is one of the few vehicles in its portfolio that isn't intended for off-roading. Around back, we have this tapering roof and window that's accented with these dual spoilers that are really sharp, but it's not all that different from something we'd see from Toyota or Chevy. There's really not anything about this that screams, I'm an EV. Overall, I think the design is somewhat generic, but I prefer it to some other SUVs that push style over substance. But what do you think? Did Jeep get the styling of the Jeep Wagoneer S right, or do you prefer something with a little more personality? Let us know in the comments below. When the Wagoneer S debuted last year, it was only available in the Launch Edition trim. For 2025, this limited trim was added, though the Launch Edition is still available. Both models come standard with 2 motors that drive all 4 wheels. The Limited makes 500 horsepower and 524 pound-feet of torque, while the Launch Edition kicks output up to 600 horsepower and 617 pound-feet of torque. The Launch Edition should hit 60 miles an hour in about 3.5 seconds, while the Limited should reach it just a few tenths of a second later. A 100 kilowatt-hour battery pack gives the Wagoneer S an estimated range of 294 miles on a single charge, though I'm not all that convinced that's achievable in the real world. That said, even if it had 270 miles, that should still be enough for most drivers, but it does fall short of expectations. Don't plan on towing much either, as it's limited to 3,400 pounds, and range should also plummet. When you do need to charge, it's capable of DC fast charging up to 203 kilowatts, which should get you from 10% to 80% in about 23 minutes. How does this all come together behind the wheel? Let's hit the road to find out. Now, as expected from almost any EV, this Wagoneer S has way more power than most drivers will ever need. It gets up to speed with authority, but if you do a full throttle stomp, it spins the tires and also gets a little squirrely. Squirrely enough where it's actually alarming and concerning. But that's actually one of my fewer complaints, and I do have a lot. So much so that I actually had to use a thesaurus to come up with different words for annoying. Now, the biggest drawback I see is the way it one-pedal drives. It's kind of a mess. First of all, you have to go into the menus every time you want to use it and every time you start up the vehicle. The other problem is it's really jerky off the line, and no matter how gently you try to leave the line, it just kind of has this ungainly lurch, and when you come to a stop, there's also just the slightest little bit of brake grabbiness that kind of gives you that rebound. It's almost impossible for me to do a nice smooth limo stop, and that's really just kind of annoying. There's that word again. Another annoyance I have is the ride quality. It's unusually firm and stiff, and that got tiresome on my highway drive yesterday, where all the seams in the concrete just kind of kept slapping the tires and kind of making that noise right there. And even when you hit a moderately sized pothole, it sends kind of a sharp jolt through the cabin. I feel like that could have been tuned a lot better. But I guess a side benefit to that is it handles fairly well. It's composed going through these sharp turns. But since it's an SUV, I really don't feel the urge to drive it like a sports car. Going back to the one-pedal driving, it's so bad actually that this is one of the very few EVs where I will not even bother trying to drive it in one-pedal drive mode. It's just so unrefined and jumpy. Another thing that flummoxes me is the adaptive cruise control. When I was in traffic yesterday, it got on the brakes unusually hard and unusually early. So much so that I was afraid that someone was going to rear end me. And for that reason, I didn't use it. And that's a telltale for a poorly designed feature. I was also peeved by some of the false alarms and odd chimes I got from the other advanced safety features. Some of them didn't even tell me why they were going off, but there were some that I just figured it mistook a shadow for another vehicle, but thankfully it didn't jump on the brakes. When it comes to visibility at least, it's fairly decent, at least out the front. I get a good indication of what's around me, and the mirrors are well sized enough where I have good situational awareness. The back window though is kind of a narrow slot, but at least we have this digital rear view mirror. Now that's more helpful if you have it loaded to the top of the roof in the cargo, but I'm never really a fan of those because you don't have any depth perception. Well, that's it for my complaints behind the wheel. Let's pull over and check out the interior. Now, this limited trim comes with the optional comfort package for about $4,000. It includes ventilated seats, a cargo cover, this digital mirror, a 19-speaker Macintosh audio system, this third passenger screen, and a hands-free liftgate. As far as the interior goes, I kind of like it. It doesn't push the whole EV thing that hard, and in a lot of ways, it feels like a regular internal combustion engine car. This dashboard and center console has this interesting little crosshatch pattern that I prefer way more than piano black, which causes all sorts of reflections. Although I am getting some reflections off of this dashboard here, but since that has a passenger display, I'm not too bothered by it. And no, I can't even see anything on that screen when it's on, so there's zero distraction for the driver. And one thing that is weird though is the head-up display is incredibly tiny. I mean, from my point of view here in the driver's seat, it's really only about that big in my vision. The seats are very supportive, but the material they're made out of doesn't breathe all that well. That's why I'm glad that this particular one has the ventilated seats. I also feel this weird little bump here between my shoulder blades, and on a long road trip, that could be a little tiresome. Now, this infotainment system is also a little last generation, both in terms of how it operates and its looks. It sometimes takes a few seconds for it to register something and finally show what you're looking for. It's at least logically organized and fairly easy to use, although some of the menus that you use more often do take a couple extra steps that can get a little annoying. For example, when I set out, I usually like the highest setting for regenerative braking, but in this case, you have to go into the menus, search around in the settings, and then finally tap that button. Also, when you want to do one-pedal driving, you have to turn off the creep mode, or else it starts rolling forward at about 2 miles an hour or so. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto both function wirelessly, and there's also a really nice wireless charge pad here that holds my phone in really well because it has these little rubber bumpers. When it comes to storage, well, it's pretty good. There's a little slot here that I find pretty good for my sunglasses, some moderately sized cup holders, and a bin that's fairly deep. The door pockets are about moderate in size. It really won't hold the larger water flasks, but the medium-sized ones should do just fine. There's also this nifty little hidden storage compartment behind the climate control screen. And another nice feature is it still keeps your primary climate controls visible at all times. There are a few things that add to the overall experience. For example, the surround view monitor here gives me a really good idea of where the corners are when I'm parking in a really tight spot. I'm also a really big fan of the Macintosh audio system. It really has some decent bass and sharp highs that kind of make me want to rock out and turn that volume up more and more and more as I keep driving. Here in the back seat, I have a good amount of room, but for a midsize SUV, I expect just a little bit more. I do have plenty of headroom and leg room, but I don't have a lot of thigh support. And that's kind of unusual considering that these seats are slightly elevated when compared to the front seats. And that gives me a nice view outward, but I'm not getting a lot of thigh support. Helping to add to the sensation of space though is this huge panoramic sunroof, and there's plenty of glass around me so I don't feel like I'm closed in. And right here we have your usual flip down armrest and cup holders. And here in the center console, we have our own air vents, as well as a household power outlet and 2 USB-C ports. Materials quality back here is actually as good as the front, with soft touch materials in the door panels and the same kind of black hash mark trim. Behind the rear seat, you can squeeze as much as 30.6 cubic feet of cargo, which is pretty good for the class. Unfortunately, it's held back by one of the worst cargo covers I think is in the industry. It's just this floppy mess that seems like it's more like an afterthought rather than a cleverly designed feature. And that's especially true when you want to access the underfloor storage, which is actually pretty generous for the class. Now, if that's not enough, there's also a 3 cubic foot cargo tray in the front. Prices for this limited trim Wagoneer S start right around $67,000, and with options, it climbs to almost $72,000. That's right where the launch edition starts. It's priced competitively for the class, with the Hyundai Ioniq 9 and Kia EV9 representing the value leaders in the $60,000 range. The Audi Q6 and Q8 e-trons, as well as the Rivian R1S and the Volvo EX90, start right around the $75,000 mark, while the luxurious Mercedes-Benz EQE starts around $80,000, and at the top, the BMW iX is above $110,000. All things considered, I'd pick the Hyundai and Kia, and not just for the cost savings. They don't suffer from some of the minor annoyances that this Wagoneer S has, and are more enjoyable to drive. On the similarly priced luxury side, I'd go with the Audi Q6 or Q8 e-tron, or the Rivian R1S. The Rivian R1S is particularly noteworthy as it has some very impressive off-road credentials that would fit quite nicely in the Jeep crowd. But what would you choose? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and we'll see you in the next review.